Hi, viewers. Hi, Scott.
Hello.
Wish you all a cheerful spring morning. Friends, we are back again this week with a very distinguished author, poet, podcaster, and editor, Scott Thomas Outlar. With great pleasure, I, Sangeeta Sharma, welcome him to the third episode of the limited series of literary and critical conversations. Scott Thomas Outlar is a literary legend. However, a short bio is contextually relevant. Here it goes. Scott Thomas Outlar is originally from Atlanta, Georgia. He now lives and writes in Frederick, Maryland. His work has been nominated multiple times for both the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net. His essay, Daydreaming Dystopia, was placed second in the 2023 Bellarmine Goes Gonzo Writing Contest. He guest edited the Hope anthology of poetry from Culture Cult Press as the author of, as well as of the 2019 to 23 Western Voices editions of Setu Mag. He's the author of 7 books, including Songs of a Dissident 2015, Abstract Visions of Light 2018, Of Sand and Sugar 2019, and Evermore 2021, written with co-author Mihaila Melnick. Selections of his poetry have been translated and published in 14 languages. He has hosted 165 episodes of the Songs of Sela podcast from 2018 to 2021. He has been a weekly contributor at Dissident Voice for the past 9 years. More about Outlar's work can be found at 17numa.com. Welcome to this show, Scott.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Sangeeta. Thank you for having me.
Should we start with the questions?
Oh, certainly. I hope everything's going well with you today so far, and just looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, great. I wish you luck then. What are the inner springs of poetry for a prolific writer like you?
Well, inspiration can come from so many sources and just a wellspring of energy all throughout life. I think that the most critical aspect is probably the inner spring, which is the autonomous soul, and that's connected to the collective source energy of all creation or consciousness itself. And I think that's the most inspirational aspect of pure beingness to begin with. And also recently in my life over the last year, the connective bond and energetic core I share with my fiance, Talia, has been just the most amazing creative source of inspiration and our love. And that goes along with our collaborative efforts and our joint project called Ahai Sumayuta, which we work on together and hopefully we'll be able to bring to the public in the months and years ahead. So highly creative and inspirational source with her. And then other inspirations include getting out into nature as much as possible, staying away from technological devices, although they bring a lot of inspiration as well. All the poetry journals and literature that can be read, and videos that can be watched on so many different subjects. Synchronicity is a big source of inspiration, psychology, philosophy, religion, astrology, sociology, observations of culture, relationships, romance, the occult, magic, spiritual esotericism, and the healing arts, dealing with diet and exercise and trying to keep a healthy body, mind, spirit. These things bring me great sources of inspiration and motivation, and try to stay dedicated to them as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, the biggest source of inspiration for me has been love, most of all, but also the waterfalls here at a park nearby in Maryland, where I've recently moved, along
Oh,
with the trees and
uh-huh.
uh, these exploding hues of the gorgeous spring blooms that have
Mm-hmm.
been coming into Bounty here recently. Uh, Always sparks something special this time of year. I love the spring season, and those are some
And
of the well
how?
springs of inspiration for me.
Mm-hmm. Great. And how has been your past month of April, the National Poetry Month?
Oh, well, April was a beautiful month for me creatively. First of all, just being inspired by other poets that I know, and everyone being sort of focused on that genre here of late. I really think kicked something into drive for me. I have a very addictive and obsessive personality sometimes, and I think I got into sending my work out a lot leading up to National Poetry Month, which somehow this was my most prolific month I've had as a poet since starting to publish my work back in 2014, and wound up being in 30 different literary venues over the past month with 70 poems and 2 essays published. So it's just been a waterfall in itself, I guess, of publications recently. And so I thank all the editors that are involved in that process of selecting my work, and the readers and friends who support my work. So it's just been a really exciting month in general.
Wow, that's astounding. Congratulations for the marvelous literary record.
Thank you so much.
What
Appreciate
many
that.
of this tribe could achieve in months, you could do it in a single month. Hearty congratulations and commendations for the 9-year anniversary of your writing
Oh, thank you.
publication. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I should mention briefly that my first poem ever was published by Dissident Voice, venue up in Canada, run by Angie Tibbs, um, 9 years ago, back in 2014. And ever since that moment, I've been a weekly contributor at Dissident Voice ever since. And I think that keeps me sort of focused each week and honed in on knowing I'm at least going to have that one poem coming out every week, and keeps me motivated to stay in that creative rhythm. So I'll always be thankful to Dissident Voice for that.
Great. Poetry as a form of dissidence. Is it working in a mass market? Dissident voices were earlier the norm. Now, very few people will risk that label. Your comment, please?
Mm. Well, I think that there is a certain segment or niche of people who have that dissident fervor within themselves, that sort of anti-authoritarianism, or not wanting to be controlled. But speaking about the masses, I think they're generally not very interested in matters pertaining to spiritual self-actualization, or attaining mastery over the senses, or the geopolitical maneuverings on the grand chessboard of the world, and the Machiavellian machinations of the conspirators operating behind the scenes.
Mhm.
Although, even as the puppet masters come forth out of the shadows and must face the bright lights here in recent years, a certain segment of society will still not really care a lick to learn what's going on around them, much less within their own consciousness. And that's unfortunate, but I think it's the way the world has always been. It's easier to just keep your head down and go
Mm.
along to get along, go along with the flow. And it's much more difficult to have that sort of indomitable will or heart within to swim upstream as a salmon, and sort of go against cultural norms.
Mhm.
Takes a lot of courage. I think that's a virtue that's lacking to some respect here in the modern age when a lot of people settle in easily to the concept of just being one of the fold. And there's a lot of victimhood in culture now that doesn't really cater to standing up as an individual. And so there's a lot of different aspects to it, but I think in general, I found, unfortunately and sadly, that a lot of people in this world would rather trade true freedom and
Mhm.
sovereignty over themselves for convenience and gilded cages, as it were, the modern creature comforts of the world. So pointing out problems and asking people to get involved with deeper solutions doesn't really sit well with a populace that is easily distracted, has a short attention span, which I have to admit I fall into that pattern as well. It's hard not to with all of the devices we have and everything flashing for us at all times, trying to grab our attention. And so I do understand that aspect of reality, but uh, it does take away from the energy of being dissident. But really, none of that matters to me in the end equation because I'm just going to do what I do anyway. I have a persuasion toward ruffling feathers because it sort of brings me a sense of joy in a certain respect. And I've never really catered my writing or opinions toward the masses or
Mhm.
the memes of the majority. I've always written primarily as a cathartic process for my own uh, delvings into the psyche and also to entertain myself. And then on par with that, but secondarily to resonate with others who share similar opinions and hopefully inspire each other in that regard. But I have found that there are more people than ever, thankfully, awakening to the truth about the corrupted institutions of this, what I call a decadent modern era. And the learning curve in that regard is getting steeper and sharper. I think it's becoming more difficult, if not impossible, to ignore what's going on in the world around us. It's as if the
Mhm.
frog has been boiling incrementally in the pot for such a long time, but finally the heat has been turned up to such a degree that natural instincts of survival are kicking in, and it's time to jump out and really take control of ourselves and of our societies and come to some better solutions here in 2023 and beyond.
So well expressed, Scott, about corrupt institutions of this decadent modern era and the steep and sharp learning curve. We are definitely inspired by your words, dear poet friend.
Thank you so much.
Well, you call yourself a dissident poet. What are the major themes of these songs, the songs of Sela?
Hmm. Well, those touch on what I was just addressing a little bit. I guess that's the themes of freedom, liberty, truth, sovereignty,
Mhm.
justice. What comes down to, in my opinion, common sense that I think we're lacking in society at this point to a large extent. And so, variations on all of those themes try to speak calmly and state ideas plainly while keeping a sense of wry humor about life in general. I think a satire is one of the most important keys when addressing political subjects or culture. I think if you go in with guns blazing, so to speak, and too off the cuff or aggressive, that can turn people off. So I think humor is a good way to find that lock key with people because the beast system that we're dealing with is monstrous, but it's also highly foolish. A lot of buffoons at the helm of these institutions. And
Mhm.
so I think when we're dealing with anyone that works with these deceptive wares of wickedness and evil in the world, it's fair game
Oh, yeah.
to mock them and ridicule them and call them out to task at every turn. And I think satire and humor is one of the great elements that can do that in a way that's not too disjointing for people. Um, I think the underlying message of my dissident poems is for people to find the truth within themselves, firstly, strengthen that inner core, and then use it in an outward expression to shake off and cast away from the corporate and state merger
Mhm.
of the control system and the power structure, and sort of decalcify that rigid ideological tendency of
Mhm.
authoritarian tyrants and the hypocrites that run this world, and break away from those systems. There's actually a poem I have that
Mhm.
I came across the other day that might speak to some of the dissonant
Mhm.
uh, ideas that I bring about. This is one that did appear at Dissident Voice that I was talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah, we
Not,
would love to hear that.
okay, not too long ago. It's called Shifting the Cycle.
Okay.
Someone said resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. Someone said, have faith in the Lord, but get out of the way of rolling rocks. Someone said, these people must be stoned out of their gourds if they think that we are going to sell our souls to the system of the beast. Someone said, welcome, my son. Welcome to the machine.
Mhm.
Someone said, big wheels keep on turning. Someone said, it is not a tool that is good or evil, but in how it is used. Someone said, I bet one of these wrenches would work wonders when shoved sideways in that gear. And I think that's the ultimate idea of dissidence, is throwing some spokes in the gears and trying to get the system to not necessarily come to a crashing halt, but be brought to a level where it can be re-examined and healed in certain aspects.
Mhm. So beautifully put up again by you. Well, what I understand is that through the songs of Silla, you challenged the corrupt political and power structures, a tough job for any poet of these days. I admire your courage and boldness in this matter and wish you more power.
Thank you.
Well, we move on to the next. Please tell us about Scott the essayist.
Hmm. Well, Scott the essayist is much like Scott the poet, I suppose. I come from the same center, no matter what genre or tact I'm taking in writing, but there are some differences. I think where my poetry can tend to go off on tangents or be more abstract and cryptic at times. When I'm working on an essay, I want to be more direct, more focused, and uh, more centered in on any particular message that I'm working with. And I
Mhm.
think that essays allow for more elaboration upon issues and news of the day, can take more time and be more free flowing with the ideas in that form. Though I still, when I write essays, try to keep a poetic flow to the words themselves. And I think of all writing as being somewhat of a rhythmic dance between the syllables and the verses. So even in essay form, I want to keep a lyrical energy behind it all. But also, when it comes to poems, I don't tend to edit as much. I think of them more as a snapshot in time, capturing a moment like
Mhm.
lightning in a bottle almost.
Mhm.
Whereas with essays, I have much more of an eagle eye when I come in to edit mercilessly, and will take as many drafts as necessary to get the message sort of chiseled down and sculpted to where I hope it can be. I think of essays if poems are a snapshot in time, essays are sort of an elaborated ekphrastic response to the larger scenes of life, in a way, relating to whatever comes about and putting our spin on it.
You are a great mind, Scott. You have put it all so aptly. An essay is an avenue that allows elaboration upon the issues and news of the day in a longer form, and that your essays are more focused and directed on a particular message, whereas poems are abstract and cryptic. Thank you so much. We move on. Well, essay as a literary form is not as popular as it once was in the West. What are the advantages of writing in this genre? Its bigger canvas or long form appeal for the essayist reflecting upon the world and its affairs?
Well, I think the question answers itself in some ways. That is the great benefit to essays, is being able to expand in that longer form, have more of a canvas to paint upon. And for those who do want to go deeper, allowing that avenue. As you said, the appeal has shifted somewhat. I think that all forms of writing, unfortunately, have suffered that fate, with technology on the rise and everyone with a screen in front of their eyes at all times or looking down at their phone. Unfortunately, writing has taken a back seat, but there are still people that enjoy it and want to learn about the world, whether it be politics or culture or history or whatever their favorite subject is. And so essays do allow for that ability to delve in deeply and disseminate information, basically, is what it comes down to with essays. For people who love to learn, people who are constantly trying to better themselves and find out more about the way the world ticks and how they tick inside, and where those two energies find alignment with the micro and macrocosms of the world. Even myself, I don't read as much as I used to, and I feel shameful in saying it. But in the past, I really loved reading essays by some of my favorite writers, Hunter S. Thompson and Norman Mailer. Joseph Campbell was a big one with his mythology sort of ideas in the path of Jungian psychology. Henry Miller was another essayist I really loved. I take my cues from the aesthetic technique that believes art should be presented through a lens that portrays it as being both brutal and beautiful. I think that's the way I look at art and life in a lot of ways. It is trying to have an eternal sense of optimism with subtle notes of sorrow mixed in. That's one of the mottos that I think I take from life. But essays, to get back to your question, certainly allow for that larger canvas, which I think is their prime benefit.
Norman Mailer, Henry Miller, and others that you named are great minds whose works still serve as lighthouses for us. I now present a beautiful excerpt from one of Scott's essays titled Fluffy Fever Dream Symphony. I wanted to know the truth and taste the peace and suck dry the bones of empathy. I wanted to understand compassion at the core nexus where new nebulas are birthed into existence by an implosive force of laser sharp intensity focused solely on evolutionary progress toward peak performance of consciousness throughout the cosmos. I wanted to rain down with a symphony of blessed purification to cleanse the world with a flood of blissful rejuvenation. It is marvelous.
Thank you.
Yeah, very sublime and so well worded.
I appreciate that. That was an essay, Fluffy Fever Dream Symphony, came out this April at Bright Flash Literary Journal. But it's actually written back in 2014, shortly after my father passed away. I can remember I was working on a book called 0 Point Graduations and wrote a lot of essays in that vein, very inspired by Hunter S. Thompson, who we had just mentioned a moment ago. But I can remember sitting in the basement and writing that particular piece. And so to see it out in the world now, 9 years later, brings a smile to my face. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Your phraseology, your lexicon actually is mind blowing.
Thank you.
Now, the next, you do spoken poetry and podcasts. How's your experience as a performer there?
I do love to get out to events. In the last couple of years, after we had the lockdowns and all of things sort of going inward for everyone, I had not been getting out as much. But before then, I had had opportunities to read my poetry in London and a couple of different times in Toronto, at the Setu festival there back in 2019, I believe it
19.
was. Yeah, that was a great time with you and Sunil, and
Mhm.
Darm Jane was there. My friend Heath Brocker, who I went with, Sharon Berg. Yeah, a lot of great. I
We
remember that
were
event.
honored to have you there that
Yeah,
time.
what a fun time that was.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, and then here in the States, I've read in several different states, Pennsylvania and Oregon and Tennessee, all across Georgia, where I'd lived my whole life until recently. So I'd read all throughout Atlanta and across that state. And I've recently moved here to Maryland. Uh,
Mm.
I've been here for about 6 months and I'm looking to get immersed in the literary scene here. So uh, anyone in the area that knows of events or workshops or open mics, anything of that nature, please get in contact with me. I'd love to connect with people on the local scene because I do think that there's beauty behind the written word, but there's something special about being in a room with other people and feeling the message of each other's words and connecting in that energetic field. But the the events of that nature, I always find fun and love to do interviews like this. It's the first one I've done in a while, so appreciate getting to run my mouth a little bit for a while. Um, Also have done workshops in the past, presented one for the Georgia Writers Museum last year, which was really, I felt, a milestone for me getting to start to teach poetry for the first time, and have given workshops and speeches to the Atlanta Writers Club and some other organizations in Georgia in the past.
Mhm.
And so I'm hoping to do that more in the future as well. Uh, I really, in my earlier years, throughout my 20s and my teens, I suffered from really crippling social anxiety and depression. And so to now be able to live on a path where I'm able to speak in open forums and on public stages is a great sign for me that I was able to sort of alchemically heal those wounds from a earlier life, shed that skin and come more fully into myself and find something that I love in life that I want to share with others. So that's one of the biggest aspects of speaking publicly to me is it's almost as if I'm conquering an earlier fear that I suffered through for a long time. And Also, I think you mentioned in my bio as well, hosted the Songs of Salah podcast. Did 165 episodes of those back from 2018 to 2021 and
Mhm.
interviewed poets and writers and artists and health enthusiasts of all kinds, dietitians and people involved with exercise programs.
Mhm.
Was able to glean so much knowledge from them and really enjoyed asking questions, getting to pick their brains. And uh, every episode, I learned something and really taught me how to be a listener as well, which is a very important part of communication.
Correct.
So I'm hoping to at one point get back into hosting podcasts. The temptation has been there of late and really just looking for the right time to get back into it because I think really looking forward to talking to people again and being able to
Mhm.
interview them.
Mhm. I totally agree with that. What you said, the most meaningful aspect of performing poetry is being amongst friends and meeting new people at events.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Those
And
like-minded
now,
individuals. Sorry,
Mhm.
didn't mean to step on you.
No, no, you can carry on.
Mm. No, I was just saying the like-minded individuals, meeting them in the world, especially at a
Yeah.
time like this, really is
Mhm.
another inspiring aspect of life in general.
Mhm. And now a question on social media. Social media presence seems to be a pull for citizens of media culture. Do you think it helps in the promotion of authors in the long run?
Mm. I think it certainly can, if used correctly or in a way that's beneficial. I think social media can be used as a tool to network with other writers and stay connected with friends and readers and just connected in general and to be able to promote your work and get it out to the world at large. Or social media can be used to mindlessly scroll through the news feeds of other people's lives and be addicted to dopamine hits and get locked into the algorithms that the tech giants like Google and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of these want us addicted to. They have it down to a fine science at this point, know how to keep us as hamsters on the wheel chasing after that hit of dopamine. So using it correctly is the most important aspect. Kind of like wielding a hammer, you can either get up on the roof and put the nails in to secure the structure, or you can bang away at your own thumb. So social media is just the same. It's a tool. It can be used if done wisely and in moderation. I think all mediums can be useful and even exciting along life's path. All modalities of life are almost as spokes on the wheel of the true, authentic self and can serve as segments and portions of the overall fullness of our life. So, social media is one spoke on the wheel, writing itself is one spoke, diet is a spoke, exercise is a spoke, our relationships are spokes. And I think having the fullness of all of those spokes flowing in the same uh, vibration creates that strong wheel for a well-centered life.
Very true. You have such a precise way of expressing thoughts and ideas. What you said just now, that social media is like wielding a hammer. You can either use it properly to put nails in the roof and secure the structure, or you can bang away at your own thumb and suffer sure stings. Very
Mm,
beautifully put.
thank you.
Working across visual, audio, audiovisual, and print and digital media, what are your deeper insights into these modes of communication in a changing environment of public discourse?
Mm. Well, there are different elements to each of those platforms. I think overall, the online venues are best at quickly spreading the words and getting the message out. There's a quicker turnover rate, a little bit easier to process. But there, for me at least, there's a sentimental allure with print, having something to hold in your hands and read from off the page tends to be slightly more impactful, I think. Uh, though both are excellent. And as we mentioned before, reading isn't what it used to be for people. So whatever mode they're using in the end is wonderful. And then with the computers and devices, they offer this opportunity like we're having right now for instantaneous communication from anywhere in the world. Uh, so technology, another one of those tools that can be used for good or ill. But I think that's the major good that comes from it, this being instantaneously connected and just information at our fingertips for anything that we want to discover. Um, but getting back to what we were talking about a minute ago, I don't think there's any comparison to any of those modalities as there is with a live event.
Correct.
I think that's the top shelf, connecting with people in person. I think that's why they try to keep us locked down during the pandemic, keep people away from each other. There's something subtle about the energies and aura of the soul that are communicated more fully and finally and in a focused manner when we're in the same space as other people. Technology is wonderful. I love it, but it will never be able to replace the deeper resonance of being incarnate in this flesh and transferring consciousness across a live wire beyond the electricity and charged from the solar recesses of our own consciousness with each other.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I totally agree with all that you have said, that technology cannot replace the deeper resonance of being incarnate. I present here a beautiful definition of art by Scott. Art is not a class taught by academia. It is a holy vibration pulsing through the veins of those who sense the truth of this world's perfect purity. We move on to the next. Your views on short and long focus of fiction, please.
Yeah, short stories and novels. I admire authors who can work in either of those genres. People who can bring whole worlds of fiction ripped straight from their imaginations to life are amazing and awe-inspiring to me. I used to be a big reader of fantasy and science fiction in earlier years. Roger Zelazny and Robert Silverberg, Robert Heinlein, among so many others were favorites of mine. And I think in recent years, I've focused more on nonfiction, being in the political, cultural realm more so, though I find a good novel or short story to be impressive beyond measure. The ability to impart a message or encapsulate an idea in a poignant way through a short piece is definitely a hard trick to pull off. I think similarly in short poems, trying to get a precise message in as few words as possible, it can be difficult. So a good writer of a short story really has to master that craft to be able to communicate the poignancy of their message and the critical aspect of it in a short way. And then likewise, the commitment and discipline that it takes to weave a larger tale and put together a novel is also highly commendable. I tip my hat to all writers that are working in that vein.
Yeah, fiction is extreme, non-fiction. Fiction has that interesting plot in it, so you can retain the interest of the reader.
Mhm.
But non-fiction is extremely challenging in more ways than one.
Mm.
But if your focus is more on nonfiction, I tip my hat for pulling it off with ease and elan, Scott.
Thank you.
A cliche, but worth asking. Does poetry pay for a highly visible poet like Scott?
Mm. Well, financially, it pays occasionally with a contest here or there, or a workshop, or book royalties. But it's definitely a niche audience in this world. I think any poet, no matter what part of their career they're at, finds that to be true. But I would say, maybe more importantly to me, that it provides an abundance of spiritual riches.
Mhm.
I'm still chiseling and grinding and flowing away at the pursuit of the monetary treasures, but poetry pays in its own particular, peculiar way. That is to say, it brings about opportunities that transcend money and experiences that exist beyond the realm of fiscal notes and fiat currency.
Very true.
Getting back to those events that we were talking about earlier, reading uh, in places across the world that I've had the opportunity to do, and get a chance to talk in conversations like this. Those are the true riches I find, and it makes me think of a quote from the Bible: "You cannot serve both God and Mammon," Jesus said.
Mm.
But I think if you have a healthy perspective, you can at least enjoy them each in their own way and dance all the while, regardless of money.
It's pure poetry, what you say. I am impressed by your literary flair. Kudos to you.
Oh, thank you.
I cannot resist myself from reading out another beautiful definition of art by Scott here. Quote, art is not a transaction. It is a soulful expression that has no choice but to be released as a reflection of the source. Unquote. Hats off to you.
Oh, thank you.
The next question, finding love is important in life. What are your romantic views?
Well, this one touches close to home because I've recently, I think, as I mentioned earlier, fallen deeply in love, more so than ever in my life, with my fiance Talia. And so that source of connection and affection and communication, having the open lines of that, is something that not only brings forth a bounty in my creative work, but just in life in general and the totality of it. So I guess if I had any advice or thoughts on romance, it would be to look for a partner, a
Mhm.
lover, a best friend, a soulmate, a queen, a goddess, a witch, who helps you in the effort to becoming the best possible version of yourself, who can challenge you when it's necessary to move past aspects of the self, such as the base ego, and melt into the emotional spaces of heart consciousness. I think is one of the great benefits of being in love. It helps us transcend the day-to-day worldly events and operate out of that more compassionate and empathetic space, which I think patience and forgiveness and empathy, on that note, could be considered the holy trinity in any relationship that expects to withstand the tests of time. There's a poem along these lines written to
Yeah,
Talia,
please recite
dedicated to
it
her,
for
that
us. Yeah.
I would read. Uh, it's called Waiting in the Window's Wings with a Warm Wave. It feels exciting, even engaging to be alive, but to love is bliss, and to be loved is electric. So if a smile is contagious, then our synchronized dance might just cause a hypnotic pandemic. Two-step tango, heal all tea, portents of potent potions. I had more than faith that you were always near. It was simply a matter of finally enjoying our fated encounter of grace. Please chisel out with a gentle hand a space in my heart where yours can rest.
The poem is awesome.
Thank you.
Well, here he has shared the three cornerstones of a lasting relationship: patience, forgiveness, and empathy. The Holy Trinity in any relationship that expects to withstand the tests of time. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on romantic love so graciously yet so potently, Scott.
Pleasure. Thank you for the questions.
May we know your writing schedule?
My writing schedule moves through phases. It can flow in different waves from time to time, but it does stay fairly consistent at most points. I think I just came out of one where I was writing like a man possessed during the National Poetry Month, as we talked about in the beginning. But I do think, regardless of the quantity or the quality that might be coming out from the pen at any given time or in any season, I do make sure to have the discipline and commitment to write in some form every single day. That's important to me. And one of my biggest pieces of advice is to journal dreams. I'm a big advocate of that as an initial course of action in the morning upon waking. I think that it helps to solidify the experience of the imaginative and subconscious realms and cement them into reality as a memory once you've jotted them down, sort of capturing the lucid inclinations and flighty behavior of dreams before the visions from the far side slip back into the ethereal realms and bring them into consciousness itself and then let them process throughout the day. And I think it helps to get them out onto paper. It has for me. And writing in that earliest part of the day sort of sets the stage for words to naturally flow throughout the hours ahead, greases the creative gears, churns the mental butter, and can potentially whip the tongue into a frenzy or the pen. So I think that my writing schedule starts right there, always in the morning, writing something. And even if I can't remember dreams, I'll just maybe put out my goals for the day or just something jotted down to sort of get that wheel in motion. But as I said, there's been many different schedules throughout the years. I can remember for years, I would walk every day up to Mountain Park when I was living in Georgia and sit at a bench in the woods there, the pine trees as my friends. And that's where I wrote in the morning or afternoon, depending on when I got there, and produced thousands of poems there. So that was a schedule that was pretty consistent for years. And then in my earlier years, I remember decades ago, before I'd ever even started publishing, I would pace and meander and dance around my house throughout the day and night alone, standing up at the edge of a kitchen bar that I had where my notebook would sit. And it was positioned in such a way that was perfect for being able to stand. So I would just be up and on my feet throughout all hours of the day, hammering away, developing my style back at that time, and then trying to hone it. And a little bit mad back in those years, but perhaps a little bit of it stayed with me in that regard. And that's perhaps part of what being a poet is being able to use that madness to a creative end. But those were the earlier years. And then I guess my writing schedule for a recent day, now that I've moved here to Frederick, Maryland, might look a little bit like waking up, jotting down my dreams, sending out emails and submissions before the sun rises, drinking some fruit juice, taking a walk up to Baker Park and write some poems near the waterfalls there, then returning home, which it really feels nice to use that word here where I'm at now in a new place. Then make some smoothies for nutrition and edit the day's poems and do any other writing related work. And then sort of chill out through the evening and spend quality time with Talia.
Great. You spoke about dream recall to solidify the experience of the subconscious. This is something very novel. It was Sigmund Freud who had spoken about the significance of the dreams in
Mm.
revealing the unconscious desires and conflicts of the individual. But you are actually practicing it. That's great.
Mm. Thank you. Yes, I find it to be so beneficial, not only to learning about one's own psyche, as Freud was talking about, but then also the creative aspect for a writer and a poet in general, like tapping into those forces and the symbols and signs and
Mhm.
archetypes that manifest themselves through the subconscious to be able to sort of bring them into focus can be really beneficial for the creative process.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much for the peek into your daily schedule.
My pleasure.
Your favorite poets?
Mm, so many to list. This question,
You
I
can
stick
name a few.
mainly to modern poets, contemporaries is what I read mostly.
Mhm.
Though I think people like Kerouac was a big influence at one point. Roger Zelazny, who I mentioned earlier, who was a novelist, also had a very poetic style that inspired me along my journey. But the contemporaries that I admire most, the current age, people like Alan Britt, Keith Brocker, Ryan Quinn Flanagan, Lady May Thunderbird, Donna Snyder was a big one. She sadly passed away this past year.
Oh.
Mihaila Melnick is one of my favorite poets who I've collaborated with so often, a great soul friend as well. Sunil Sharma at Setu, one of the great writers. Sanjeev Sethi, another Indian writer, very fond of. Shika A, Mila Blust, Dustin Pickering,
Mhm.
just on and on and on and on. There's so many. And
That's an impressive list of names.
it's wonderful contemporary writers. I hope people will go check out.
Um, can I ask you a few of your memorable quotes?
Memorable quotes, absolutely. Uh, there's one when it comes to a question like this that pops out immediately. This is one of my great mantras that I live by in life. It comes from the Gospel of Thomas.
Mhm.
If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. I just find that to be the epitome of life itself. We all have some gift or talent or destiny that's within us. And if we go along with it and see it to its ends and follow it along our path of bliss, then doors open and ideas manifest, opportunities are presented around us, and we can live a fulfilled and healthy life. But if we repress or suppress those things that bring us the most joy in life or that we're truly meant to be doing, then it almost becomes cancerous inside of us or calcifies within us and can lead to uh, a life not lived on the right path of resentment and jealousy and all of the deadly sins that we know so well, or just not being fulfilled in life itself, which is the greatest sin, perhaps, not living up to our full potentiality. So that one always jumps off the page for me and has, ever since I read it, been something that I try to keep in mind at all times. But some of the other quotes that came to mind were by one of my favorite writers, Friedrich Nietzsche. And this is important for dissident poets. Battle not with monsters, lest ye become a monster. And if you gaze into the abyss gazes also into you. So I think that's a good warning to always keep in mind when we're battling the systems of this world, not to let them take over our psyche and corrupt us, but to go at them in a way from a sense of detachment almost, in the sense that we don't let them overwhelm us with their energy, but stay centered in our own. And I think that gets me to another quote by Joseph Campbell, which is to participate joyfully in the sorrows of the world. I think that goes right along with it. No matter what's going on, we can choose what perspective we want to bring. And Joseph Campbell always epitomized that to me. Thomas Jefferson, his quote, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God," is something that I hold very deeply within me. Having been born with a streak of rebellion down my spine and through my soul, challenging authoritarianism is a lifelong mission. And so I've always found that quote by Jefferson to be so important. Uh,
A
I like
long
this.
list of quotations, very good collection of thoughts, a museum of finest writing assembled by Scott. You are a great mind. We salute to you. And conversation with you was very engaging and enriching. Thanks for your quality time. Thanks, viewers. Thanks, Scott. A very big thanks to you. Namaste.
Thank you,
Next week,
Sangeeta.
next week we will be here again with another distinguished guest. Till then, bye-bye.
Bye.